Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, Oxnard residents, and city staff. My name is Jeff Pengelly. I serve as the Assistant Director of Community Development. This is a presentation regarding the ordinance adopting and modifying the 2022 California Building Standards Codes and the International and Uniform Codes. For some background, the state of California updates the building regulations contained in what we collectively call the California Building Standards Code every 3 years. We're currently at the end of one of those 3-year cycles. We are in the 2019 version of the California codes, and this current version took effect on January 1st, 2020. The next version, the 2022 California Building Standards Code, will become effective January 1st, 2023. State codes are based on Council, the National Fire Protection Agency, IAPMO, the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials, and other reference standards. State agencies then take these model codes and modify them so that they comply with state laws and other California mandates. In addition to state codes, this ordinance also adopts model codes directly, specifically the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code and the 1997 Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings. These two model codes are adopted to facilitate property maintenance and abatement activities. As I mentioned before, collectively we call the California codes the California Building Standards Code, and it includes quite a few volumes. I'll list a few of them here for you. California Building Code, the California Residential Code, California Green Building Code, California Electrical Code, Mechanical Code, Plumbing Code, California Fire Code, California Energy Code, as well as the California Historical Code, Administrative Code, and others. So there's quite a few parts to the California Building Standards Code. Local amendments. So local jurisdictions can make amendments to the California Building Standards Code based on specific findings, and that is what this ordinance is doing. The findings themselves are grouped into several categories. The first is administrative. Again, these are findings for why we are making changes to the state, the California Building Standards Code. So administrative is one reason we can make those changes. And as the title implies, it's just related to code administration, some titles and text changes within the code, and some clarifying and organizational changes of the code. The next group is technical changes. These have to be based on local climatic, geologic, and topographical conditions. And we make findings, and those are contained here in this item before council, that these findings relate these local conditions to the changes we are making to the state building standards code. Some of these technical changes include local seismic conditions and associated hazards, including liquefaction. Some areas of town, particularly close to the ocean, have a high groundwater table. And we have some areas of town that have high clay content in their soils. We do have significant Santa Ana wind events and fire hazards associated with those events. The city has a very flat topography, and that can make it prone to flooding. And we have beachfront, beach area, harbor area construction, which is more prone to some of the moist air and moisture issues associated with being close to the coast. Some highlights for the local amendments that we are proposing, and these are similar to amendments we've made in past code adoptions. Local seismic and weather protection modifications. We have changed and modified some provisions to ensure that people's dwellings and other structures do not flood in a heavy rainstorm. For example, there's some minimum foundation elevations and some clarifying grading criteria so that stormwater will drain away from structures safely. There's quite a few modifications in different locations to the seismic design regulations. Oxnard is in one of the higher seismic design categories in Southern California, not unlike a lot of the LA Basin and other areas throughout California, such as the Bay Area. These modifications to some of the seismic provisions in the code, they implement a lot of ongoing post-Northridge earthquake code modifications, and they also simplify some of the prescriptive design requirements. This is done based on internal city staff knowledge and experience, but also in coordination with local and regional building officials organizations, and including, one of those includes input from the Structural Engineers Association of Southern California. There are also fire protection local amendments. The city of Oxnard has our own fire sprinkler requirements and regulations, which we adopt, that are a little more intensive than the model, the state code, excuse me. We've had those in place for quite some time now. We adopt, in this case, regulations for very high fire hazard severity zones. And those will be mapped, and those are areas where there's some unmitigated vegetation growth, mostly around the Santa Clara River area and some of the canals, like the Edison Canal. There's a lot of vegetation growth that is mapped out as a very high fire hazard severity zone. So there's some additional construction and other requirements for any construction near those areas. There's also a lot of clarifications regarding fire access gates, hydrants, portable fire extinguishers, operational permits, etc. There are local amendments, as I alluded to before, based on administrative changes. Some examples here: how long a permit or plan check is active. We modify the language to provide more flexibility and give us additional, the ability to provide additional time for plan check or permit extensions. There are a list of items that are exempt from permits that we modify slightly. We reduce the allowable fence height and the allowable retaining wall height slightly. We reduce the height to what is allowed to be installed without a permit, so that we want permits over a certain height. And that's because of the Santa Ana wind conditions and the seismic conditions here. So rather than 7-foot fence being allowed to be built without a permit, we require a permit for any fence over 6 feet tall, for example. We have modification that allows the building official to require a licensed design professional, either an engineer or an architect, where the nature of work warrants such a licensed professional. We also have provisions that give us the flexibility to require additional reports, such as soils or geotechnical reports, structural calculation, and other supporting documents where the project, the specific nature of the project requires that. Other administrative changes included some of the names of the administration and enforcement agencies and other cleanup items such as that. And permit fees and other administrative items are changed to clarify, for example, that plan check and permit fees are calculated as adopted by the Oxnard City Council and resolutions. The recommendation for this item is that City Council approve the first reading by title only and subsequent adoption of an ordinance repealing and reenacting Articles 2 through 12, 15, and 16 of Chapter 14 of the Oxnard City Code pertaining to the California Building Code, the California Residential Code, California Green Building Standards Code, the International Property Maintenance Code, the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings, California Historical Building Code, California Electrical Code, California Existing Building Code, California Mechanical Code, California Reference Standards Code, California Plumbing Code, California Energy Code, fire codes, and fire sprinklers. That concludes this presentation. I will be available for any questions. Thank you.